hot and hungry. The quiet cell, half-dead prisoners, long-term hunger, and high-temperature dehydration, made the prisoners breathless. There was a sudden sound of footsteps in the corridor outside the cell. There was a tingling jingle in this powerful footstep. The 4 jailers with rigid faces dragged the 2 prisoners, the ear-piercing clanging, it was the sound of shackles and chains rubbing on the ground. In each cell, the half-dead prisoners looked at the group of people passing by indifferently, as if they were accustomed to such things. The iron door was opened by the jailer, and the 2 seriously injured prisoners who were unconscious, seemed to be thrown into their respective cells. At the same time, in the torture room on the 4th floor, the atmosphere is also somewhat abnormal. 2 unusually tall men stood in a silent stalemate. Suddenly one of them had a man with devil horns on his head, and said with a sullen expression, "Hilyu, this is the last time. If you can't control your hands anymore, I can only report the truth to the director. Cut, it's just a bunch of scum from the sea." After showing a slight expression of disdain, the man with the sword turned around and picked up the military cap placed aside, and then pushed open the door of the torture room indifferently and walked away. "Damn it!" The devil horn man clenched his fists angrily, a few drops of purple liquid dripped from his hand, and suddenly a purple mist appeared on the ground. The jailers who were on duty outside saw this scene from the corner of their eyes. They were all in cold sweat, and they seemed to be very afraid of the demon horn man. Magellan sensed his gaffe and sucked the diffused purple gas back into his body, and then he felt his stomach turn over again. Hurriedly walked outside, but before leaving, he solemnly told another tall man who looked like a pharaoh, "Hanbani, look at the Ziliu, or you will be dead if the director initiates a fire." Pharaoh Hanbarni nodded and replied, "I don't want it, Hilyu will cut me down." "Ah! I accidentally said what was in my heart again, okay, Deputy Director Magellan." Magellan had already run away clutching his stomach. Was thrown back to the cell with 2 seriously injured prisoners, motionless as if they were dead, only the slight ups and downs of their chests proved that the 2 were still alive and stubbornly. One of the prisoners, who looked like a young man, had a big, oblique cut on his chest, and a lot of blood was leaking from the wound. The dry and high-temperature environment makes the cell like an oven. This environment can cause severe dehydration to the human body. But for the wound, it will accelerate the scab formation of the wound. A pair of eyes filled with confusion and surprise opened slightly in the dark, and suddenly his brow wrinkled, as if he felt the wound on his body. There was a burst of tingling pain. Didn't get up, he just lay on the hot floor, his eyes adjusted to the dim surroundings in a while. "I see. This is the hunger of the great undersea prison. The name of this body is One Piece Gao. Is not One Piece Gao, but One Piece Wang Gao." Wang Gao was born in the country of flowers in the West Sea, the country where the green peppers and the 8 treasure marines are located, and he is also a distant relative of the great pirate King Ji. In 1480, the Rocks pirates fell apart directly after the Battle of the Valley of Gods. Whitebeard, Golden Lion, Cute, Ant, Captain John, Wang Ji and others, after this battle, they took their little brothers and went to their own things. Wang Ji returned to his hometown of Flower Country around 1489, recruited a group of young people, and prepared to fight for dominance in the New World. Wang Gao, who was only 13 years old at the time, joined Wang Ji's pirate group under such circumstances, starting from a handyman and fighting all the way to the person in charge of a ship. Then in 1495, he met Carp, who was chasing Roger, and he was thrown into the sea with a fist, becoming a prisoner pushing the city, and he has been locked up until now. In the of hunger for a long time, there is not much time concept in his brain, but today in the torture room, he accidentally heard a news that allowed him to determine the time at this time Haiwan calendar year 1498, Roger on the eve of execution. Because the Golden Lion has just been in prison today. Feeling the weakness of his body, Wang Gao knew that this was the effect of the halo stone shackles. This body had already eaten the devil fruit, and because of the devil fruit, he saved him 3 times. The first time was when he was defeated by Carp, the second time was today when I was tortured by the rain of rain, and the third time was at this moment. If this body is not a person with devil fruit ability, it would be dead in the torture room today. It was not ability that saved him, but the identity of a person with devil fruit ability saved him. The torture of Use Hilyu, that is a direct killing. Just today, the Golden Lion was escorted to Advance City. Magellan came to inform Hilyu of rain, and then found that the other party was torturing prisoners. If it was an ordinary prisoner, Magellan would not care too much. The problem is that among the 10 prisoners, Wang Gao and the other 2 prisoners are those with devil fruit ability. There are 2 major principles for advancing the city. First, you cannot arbitrarily execute the devil fruit ability. Second, you cannot arbitrarily execute the relatives of the great pirates. There are these 2 principles. The first big principle is to prevent the devil fruit from being reborn after the death of the devil fruit capable person. After all, before Vegapunk, Caesar, and Blackbeard, there was no technology in this world to accurately regenerate the devil fruit. Once the devil fruit capable person dies, the devil fruit will randomly respawn on the fruit somewhere in the world. Compared with domineering, swordsmanship and other methods, devil fruits can directly create a strong person, and the abilities of many devil fruits are extremely terrifying. For example, the Golden Lion who just went to jail, if the Navy killed the Golden Lion directly, reading www.yuyugonshu.com, the next person to obtain the fluttering fruit, can draw a gourd according to the method of using the Golden Lion. He is a strong man at sea. Therefore, those with the devil fruit ability imprisoned in Advance City are not allowed to be executed casually. To execute them, the approval of the world government must be obtained. Every arrested person with the devil fruit ability was recorded in detail, and the list and information must be sent to the CP agency directly under the world government for record. Every time a devil fruit capable person dies in Push City, he needs to report the detailed situation. As for the promotion of concealment within the city, don't think that the CP organization is a display. After the death of the devil fruit ability, the devil fruit will be reborn, and there is no way to hide the world government. Kill 1 or 2 devil fruit capable people, it can also be covered by accidental death. Once the number of deaths exceeds a certain number, the world government will definitely intervene. He estimated that Use Hilyu, this guy, was later imprisoned in infinite hell by Magellan because he killed too many people with devil fruit ability and was directly punished by the world government. And the second principle is actually very simple. After being arrested, the relatives of the big pirates are not killed directly for many reasons, such as making the big pirate throw a rat repellent device, torture information, recruit security exchanges, and human experiments. Wang Gao is because of the identity of the devil fruit ability, and the identity of the Wang Ji pirate group. Let Magellan take action to stop the reign of Ziliu. But when he was rescued by Magellan, he had already been chopped off by 6 or 7 knives. Although the wound was simply treated, he entered a state of dying. If it weren't for his wafting soul, it merged with the original soul of this body and had a special reaction. It is estimated that Wang Gao would really die here. The fusion of the 2 souls was actually completed by accident. He just entered this world, his soul is already extremely weak. If facing the soul of a normal person, he can't swallow the other person at all. Without a choice, he could only retreat to the next best thing. When Wang Gao was dying, he swallowed the soul of the other party and waved the demon fruit that was about to leave and stabilized in his body again. There is nothing wrong, it is the wave of devil fruit. He was in the state of soul, although only at the moment when Wang Gao was on the verge of death, he briefly felt the peculiar devil fruit ability. After stabilizing the devil fruit ability, the body after the 3 fusions regained a weak vitality, allowing him to survive. But his power of this devil fruit. All right. It is the fruit of the iron chain. No, it is a chain fruit to be precise, similar to Doflamingo's string fruit. If his memory is not wrong, this devil fruit should have been eaten by the treasure hunter. Although it may seem like a garbage ability, things like devil fruit have a lot to do with the user's IQ and knowledge reserves. To put it bluntly, many people with the devil fruit ability have suffered a loss of literacy. But as soon as he felt the body's weakness and the painful wound, Wang Gao's brain began to think. Is still called Wang Gao, just for convenience, and he has no nostalgia for his past life, but he is a technical nerd and a paranoid patient. The top priority now is to solve the sea tower stone shackles in his hands, and then find a way to escape from the city. Fortunately, before the Golden Lion escaped from prison, the prisoners of the Devil Fruit ability were either only in shackles or handcuffs, without further upgrades. After the Golden Lion escapes from prison, the city's precautions against prisoners with Devil Fruit ability will be further strengthened. The plan to chop his feet like a Golden Lion basically has no chance of success. At the same time, through this torture room incident, Wang Gao has guessed some possibilities of the Golden Lion's escape, explaining why the Golden Lion can chop off his own feet in a cell without weapons. The reason is very simple, because the Golden Lion may not have escaped in the cell, but in the torture room, because there are weapons there. Is just this jailbreak plan, which is of little reference value for Wang Gao. After all, he doesn't have floating fruits, and after cutting off his own hands, he still can't escape. The current Propulsion City is not only limited to Magellan, Rain no Hiliu, Hanbani, etc., but also a director, Columbus, who is not known for his strength. Wang Gao's bounty before his imprisonment was 72 million baileys. After being tortured for so many years, coupled with long-term hunger and dehydration, he could show 1/10 of his strength. Thank God! With this kind of strength, wanting to forcefully rush out of the city is tantamount to idiotic dreaming. But I'll take care of the injury first. Hot and hunger fills the hunger hell. All the prisoners are very quiet. Although pushing the city will not directly kill them, it will definitely not make them feel better. The prisoners in the hunger hell are all prisoners with a bounty of more than 50 million baileys, or prisoners with special talents, such as those with devil fruit ability. In order to ensure that the prisoners do not resist or die directly, prisoners in the hunger usually eat one meal every 5 days. But today seems to be a special case. 2 jailers carried an iron bucket and opened Wang Gao's cell. Then they observed his body and found that he did not die. The bearded jailer joked, "Fortunately for you, you weren't killed by the guards of Ziliu." The other one-eyed jailer was expressionless, scooped 3 spoons of mushy stuff from the iron bucket and placed it on the trough beside him, then turned his head and said to the beard, "Let's go." The 2 jailers locked the door again, and the cell was quiet again. Wang Gao opened his eyes, and after getting up, he climbed to the food trough with difficulty. Like a pig in a farm, he lowered his head and ate the mushy stuff on the rock trough. There is no such thing as dignity. He just wants to live now. Without replenishing food and water, the wounds on his body will recover very slowly. Wang Gao doesn't want to experience the powerless feeling of being slaughtered this morning. Licked the food trough hungrily, he lay on the ground again, the hot floor. There was no need to worry about catching cold or something. Perhaps considering that his injuries were too serious, the jailer did not put him in a cell of several people, but found a separate vacant cell. If you were sent to that kind of cell with many people in that state of dying, it would take a long time before you would be eaten up. Quickly hypnotizes oneself into a deep sleep state. This is a small skill in the previous life. After soul fusion, it seems to be strengthened. After a while, Wang Gao in the cell will enter a deep sleep state. Time flickered, 3 days passed in the blink of an eye, and it was the regular meal time once every 5 days. It was the same 2 jailers. The bearded jailer pushed a trolley with a large iron bucket on it, and the one-eyed jailer took a large spoon and put the paste into the cell's trough. Each prisoner only had 1 spoonful, which was roughly equivalent to an ordinary 1 bowl of a bowl. The usual quiet hunger hell. With the arrival of the eating time, there are only some noises. The one-eyed jailer came to Wang Gao's cell. When he saw him sitting up, he knew that he was almost recovered. He took a spoonful, put it in the trough, and walked to the next cell. Wang Gao didn't feel the slightest embarrassment, so he lowered his head and licked the food in the trough. After eating, he sat on the floor with his back leaning against the inner wall. He checked the wound a little and saw the wound that had almost recovered. He had to sigh for the humans in this world. The resilience was almost monster level. Can finally think about how to escape. His eyes scanned the opposite cell. There was a corridor about 15 meters wide in the middle. The opposite cell was a long-legged family and 3 white bones. Obviously the 3 hapless guys must be in the other's stomach. One leg has been broken. There are 3 cells on the opposite side that can be observed, which means that the opposite side can also observe his cell. However, due to the occlusion of buildings in the corridor, the front half of the cell is clearly illuminated, but the second half is not illuminated. The monitoring phone worm set up above the corridor was also unable to monitor the second half of the cell. In addition to the internal lighting system of the city, it did not pursue full coverage too much, resulting in sparse lighting in the corridor. Is outside the cell area. The sand sea is not only hot and arid, but also sunny, but the composition of this sand sea is a bit special. The sand inside is actually weathered by prisoners' bones. It can be seen that in the third layer of Advanced City, in the past 800 years, how many prisoners have died tragically here, and the bones of Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com have all weathered into a desert. He sat on the innermost side and stared at the opposite side for a while, but couldn't observe the inside of the 3 cells on the opposite side. Of course, this has a lot to do with the prevalence of night blindness among prisoners. Advanced City is not a charity organization. They don't care if the prisoners lack vitamins, which will lead to night blindness. May still be happy to see it, it is convenient to manage and weaken the prisoners. After observing the surroundings, he focused his attention on the halo stone shackles in his hands. In the past 3 days, Wang Gao was observing the shackles besides resting. Wang Gao, who doesn't want to chop his hands, his brain is running quickly. Compared with brute force, he actually has at least 3 plans to get rid of this sea tower. Is just how to operate, which requires him to further consider. If he doesn't think about everything well, even if he gets rid of the shackles of the sea tower, he can't escape from Pushing City. From what I have just observed and remembered before, among the 3 cells on the opposite side, except for the disabled long-legged clan directly opposite, the cell on the left side is empty, and the cell on the right side is a demon fruit-capable person with a sharp-mouthed monkey gill. The long-legged clan was imprisoned earlier than Wang Gao. Now he is definitely suffering from severe night blindness. As long as he is hidden in the dark inside the cell, he should not be found. The only person to worry about right now is the monkey in the cell on the opposite side. That guy was imprisoned about a year ago. It is estimated that night blindness will not be too serious. Because it was a person with devil fruit ability, the monkey was also held in solitary confinement. It is estimated that Pushing City is worried that these people with devil fruit ability will be used as food by other prisoners. Would choose to be detained alone to avoid the death of too many prisoners with devil fruit ability. This is one of the strategies for advancing the city. Move the body laboriously, moving the position from the center of the inner wall to the right corner of the inner wall. This is just a blind spot with the right cell on the opposite side. No matter how strong the eyesight of the monkey is, it is impossible to observe this place through the wall. As for the problem of seeing and hearing domineering, not every pirate master's seeing and hearing domineering cannot be maintained 24 hours a day. Especially for the prisoners of Hunger Hell, the body is already extremely weak, and the arrogance of seeing and hearing will only accelerate the consumption of energy. Wang Gao himself has seen and heard of domineering and armed domineering. After all, he has been with Wang Ji in the New World for 6 years, and he has also become the person in charge of a pirate ship. Without the strength, he would have been 3 meters tall. Although seeing and hearing colors have strengths and weaknesses, they all have the same effect, that is, when others spy on themselves with seeing and hearing colors, they will have some feelings. In the dozen or so cells around him, there are 3 people who are sure to have knowledge, such as the disabled long-legged clan opposite, and the one who was tortured by Hillia with him that day, but that guy should have died. The last one was a man from the Sky Island who was 4 cells away from him. This guy was sent in about 3 months ago, and he released his domineering look as soon as he entered. But after being hungry for more than 3 months, that guy probably doesn't have much energy anymore. Observing the surrounding environment well, Wang Gao began to consider how to get rid of the stone shackles of the sea tower. He said that there are at least 3 options, which is not a joke. Concentrated, slowly infiltrated the shackles with the domineering sight and color, picked up the iron chains connected to the shackles, and gently collided with each other a few times. Hit the rocks on the floor a few more times, and finally tapped the shackles lightly with his hands, retracting his domineering look and seeing, and the ups and downs of his chest, it can be seen that his actions just now were not easy. But the harvest is very great. He has already estimated the approximate vibration frequency range of this halo stone shackles. As long as he tries a few more times, he can lock an accurate vibration frequency. Halo stone is indeed very hard, but in this world, there is nothing absolutely indestructible. At least the sea floor stone shackles in front of me are not indestructible, otherwise there would be no way to process it. With his weak body, there is really no way to break the sea floor stone by brute force. But as long as he understands the fixed vibration frequency of Halashi, he can use very precise resonance effects to make the Halashi crystal gradually disintegrate by colliding 2 shackles with each other. This is the first plan. The problem is this plan, there are 2 fatal problems, that is, it has to make a louder sound, and it will completely destroy the stone shackles of the sea tower. The previous question will attract the attention of the surrounding prisoners and even the attention of the jailer. The last question is that it is impossible to disguise it, because Propulsion City attaches great importance to their devil fruit abilities, and will patrol it once a month. Once the halo stone shackles are destroyed, he will either escape directly from the prison or he can only be caught back. If he fails to escape, it is estimated that both hands and feet will be cut off. While Wang Gao has evaluated all the current conditions, the maximum probability of his successful escape is about 12.7%. This still needs the help of Golden Lion. With such a low success rate, he would not choose to escape now unless he had to do it. Therefore, the plan to destroy the halo stone shackles by resonance is to be determined for the time being. The next 2 plans don't need to directly destroy the halo stone shackles, but they need his body and make certain sacrifices. The second solution is the hand bone displacement method. He can directly move the bones of the palm and let the shackles take off from the hands. But the side effect is that the process is very painful. After resetting the palm bones, even humans in this world have amazing physical resilience and still need to rest for about a week. Although he didn't need to chop his hands, his disabled state for a week basically lost his ability to move, and his combat effectiveness would be further reduced. If you encounter a surprise inspection, it is difficult to quickly put the shackles back on again. It is another plan to die. The second plan, put it aside. And the last third plan is the safest, and the shackles can be put back on at any time. That is. Wang Gao put his index finger into his mouth, bite hard, and directly bit off his index finger from the base near the palm of his hand. But he did not let go, but continued to cover the wound on his palm, sucking the blood that flowed out. In the hunger hell, blood cannot be wasted, and the meat on the index finger cannot be wasted either. After half a day, the meat on that index finger has been eaten clean by him, just like the braised chicken feet in my memory. Finally, he picked out the proximal phalanx of the index finger, which is the longest and thickest of the 3 phalanxes. With his body size of 2.73 meters, this phalanx is long enough. Before doing this, Wang Gao had roughly measured the length of his index finger and the depth and width of the keyhole of the shackles. There was not much difference between the 2. This kind of old-fashioned keyhole structure of shackles has long been known to Wang Gao, who has the color of knowledge. But the freshly baked phalanx key is still a semi-finished product. It needs to be dried for a few days before grinding into a suitable shape. As for why we should use self-mutilation to obtain a bone, the main reason is that there is nothing else in the cell to use. Food is mushy, not even a piece of bone residue, so what can I use without my own bones? Bone sand, quiet, and dry heat are the characteristics of hunger that are different from other layers. Unknowingly, it was time to eat once again in 5 days, and it was the two jailers with Oneid and Big Beard. 1 spoonful of paste, pour it into the trough. When the cart passed by, he crawled over, ate the food inside, and leaned against the fence. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com silently observed the surrounding situation for a while. Then crawled back to the corner. At this time, the bone key in his hand had been roughly polished out, just enough to be inserted into the keyhole. However, he did not act rashly at this time, but continued to close his eyes and rest. The surrounding prisoners had just eaten a little bit of food, and some of their strength would be restored. If someone suddenly uses the domineering look, they may find some of his abnormalities. Just in case, Wang Gao did not act rashly, but continued to hibernate. The next day, as soon as he opened his eyes, the surrounding cell returned to the dead silence of the past. He took out the bone key. It was not so much a key as a bone needle. After the bone needle was inserted into the keyhole, he gently stirred it 6 or 7 times, and the shackles made a slight click instantly, and the shackles of his left hand were opened. Drew the gourd like this, and within 20 seconds, the shackles of his right hand were also opened. As the halo stone shackles got out of his body, he instantly felt a power emerge, that was his devil fruit ability and suppressed physical strength. Although he opened the shackles, Wang Gao was not overwhelmed. He is still in the cell, and he is pushing the city on the bottom of the sea without wind, without the flying ability of a golden lion. There is no difference between trying to escape from prison and seeking death. Even if he merged with Wang Gao's soul, his will still rested on him. The pirate's arrogant, ignorant, and fearless emotions could hardly affect his will. If you want to leave Propulsion City, it is impossible to rely on brute force to work hard. The brain is a good thing, but unfortunately the individual power in this world is too strong, so that many people are not used to doing things with their brains. With his current ability, it is possible for him to escape from Pushing City silently as long as he is given a period of time. Feeling the power of the long-lost devil fruit in his body, Wang Gao concentrated his mind to sense every part of his body. Skin, blood, organs, bones. And the gene chain in the cell, after he and Wang Gao's soul were completely fused, the power of the two souls was about 3.73 times higher than that of Wang Gao's single body. Can estimate a value of 3.73 times, to benefit his soul, wandering in the space-time dimension for a very long time. During the wandering time and space, his soul has suffered various dangers, but there are not only dangers but also opportunities in the crisis. In order to survive, he tried various methods. In that desperation, through desperate attempts, he gained several abilities. These abilities are: foreseeing the super sense, this ability allows him to predict the future in about 10 seconds. Quantum computing is a special ability developed on the basis of his own quantum soul. At this time, his soul has a calculation capacity of 64 qubits. Spiritual body training, this ability is to use the relatively stable and small energy level of the time-space waves in the space-time dimension to strengthen its own quantum soul. Now that the soul has returned to the material world, the spiritual body has lost its use environment in tempering, and the intensity of the time and space waves of the material world is like the difference between a pond and the sea when compared with the time and space dimensions he has experienced. With the strength of the space-time waves of this material world, it has no effect at all on his spiritual body tempering. Entering this material world was actually a mistake. At that time, he encountered a terrible torrent of time and space. In order to ensure the safety of the core, the quantum soul exhausted most of its power. Otherwise, it would be more than enough to take away the body of a normal person with the strength of his soul. As soon as he entered this material world, his position was advancing into the city, and the situation at that time was very dangerous, because his weak soul, as soon as he came here, felt an attraction, as if he wanted to pull the soul into a certain place. Looking back now, he somewhat guessed that the attraction at that time might have come from the underworld of this world. If he did not choose to merge with Wang Gao's soul and stabilize the spirit body in his body again, the result would be to be drawn into the underworld. Wang Gao can now see the genes in the cell because of the fusion of predictive supersensing, quantum computing and seeing and hearing color domineering. After the fusion mutation, the experience at this time has reached a new height, that is, it is predicted that the next 30 seconds, the maximum coverage radius is about 36 kilometers, and the longest linear detection distance is about 240 kilometers. This is a macroscopic enhancement. Then there is the strengthening of the microcosmic aspect, the ability to observe atomic-level particles, plus quantum computing power. This is one of his trump cards. Carefully observed the body's genetic sequence, and soon he showed a clear smile. After the halo stone shackles were released, some genes in his genetic sequence were activated, or the restrictions were unlocked. And Wang Gao discovered that the expression genes of the devil fruit ability are concentrated on the 24th pair of chromosomes. Due to the lack of samples, he does not know whether it is a human being in this world, which has 24 pairs of chromosomes, or it has only 23 pairs of chromosomes, and the devil fruit is expressed as the 24th pair of chromosomes. This requires further research. It is best to collect the genes of ordinary people and those with devil fruit ability for comparative research. However, according to some scenes in memory, those with devil fruit ability may not necessarily be pure creatures. For example, a weapon that ate the devil fruit, Brooke, the owner of the yellow spring fruit, and Perona Mononoke, the princess who can get out of her body. These examples show that the devil fruit ability does not necessarily need to be expressed as a gene. No, Wang Gao narrowed his eyes slightly, as if he thought of something interesting. The devil fruit wave, the 24th pair of chromosomes, the carrying of non-living bodies and the devil fruit wave, the soul. Countless data torrents are derived from quantum computing. 10 minutes later, Wang Gao, who opened his eyes, sighed slightly, but there were still too few samples, and it seemed that he would leave here as soon as possible. I am coming to this world. Vegapunk with 500-year-old technology that surpassed the era, various strange devil fruit abilities, various ancient creatures and strange species. Thinking of this, the corner of Wang Gao's mouth raised, and he immediately tried to manipulate the devil fruit ability in his body, that is, the ability of chain fruit. The development of the devil fruit ability is a matter that varies from person to person. When there is no way to replace the devil fruit for the time being, the ability to deeply dig the chain fruit is the best choice now. Wang Gao's own abilities can be used for direct combat, that is, rough physical skills, swordsmanship, armed domineering, and spear skills that can reload and shoot. After the mutation, the domineering and quantum computing tend to be auxiliary types. Even if they can directly observe the atomic level, but they do not have the ability to manipulate at the atomic level, they still cannot maximize the effects of these two abilities. Now the devil fruit ability is a gateway to atomic manipulation. The ability of the chain fruit in the previous Wang Gao is to release blood and manipulate the iron chain, so it is called the iron chain fruit. Actually, this devil fruit should be called chain fruit, similar to Doflamingo's string fruit. The ability of the superhuman devil fruit is a test of the user's IQ and knowledge reserves. The uneducated user can only develop some superficial abilities. Is like the predecessor Wang Gao, piercing the palm of the hand to release blood, and operating the iron chain that has infiltrated the blood. This way of using it is simply silly. Is it not good to manipulate the gene chain in the body? This is the loss of ignorance. UU reading www.uugonshu.com. With the help of atomic level domineering, coupled with the huge computing power of quantum computing, the chain fruit ability in the body began to work. Compared with external manipulation, the chain fruit ability is more convenient and efficient to operate in the user's body, especially its own super microscopic observation and huge computing power, which allows the chain ability to manipulate its own gene chain. There is a kind of like the arm makes the finger easy. But at this time he encountered a problem, that is, there is no experimental body, and the genetic modification is not random. Although he can change back, he is in a situation at this time, but in the cell of hunger hell, even if he can precisely control his body, he can consume physical strength and energy, and there is no way to quickly replenish it. How to do? I suppressed the impulse to modify the gene immediately, and began to think about how to solve the problem of the experimenter. During his thinking, Wang Gao did not relax his vigilance. The pressure factor in his ears increased rapidly, which made his hearing rise by several orders of magnitude. Stress factors are the core component of the animal's auditory organs. At this time, he can hear the subtle sounds of several kilometers around him. This is not a domineering look, but a pure biological force. Using this method is to avoid one of the shortcomings of seeing and hearing domineering, that is, it is easy to be noticed by people who are also domineering. Pure biological hearing is equivalent to a passive sonar monitor. It does not need to actively emit sound waves. No matter how strong people see or hear, they will not notice that they are being monitored. This kind of super hearing is not unlimited. The user must have enough powerful information processing capabilities to analyze and process complex sound sources. Wang Gao relied on his quantum computing ability to use this ability. While listening to the surrounding movement, Wang Gao thought about how to solve the problems of the experimenter. Suddenly his eyes flashed, looking at the food trough next to the fence, showing a thoughtful expression. Maybe he could get some solutions from the food. Quantum computing instantly divides a part of its computing power for analysis of related possibilities. After half an hour, a preliminary solution is obtained. However, the premise of all this is to determine the success of this plan based on the analysis of those mushy foods. After having a solution, Wang Gao immediately went into a dormant state, minimizing the consumption of physical functions. Of course, his super hearing still maintained a 500 meter monitoring range. 4 days later, it was the one-eyed jailer and the bearded jailer who came to distribute food. Climbing to the edge of the food trough, Wang Gao stared at the tawny mush, with his head down, showing a slight smile. Using the domineering microscopic observations just now, he discovered the genes of 2 organisms. One of them should be a plant similar to the rice family, which can be analyzed through the shelled rice grains in the paste. The other species should be algae, because the paste contains kelp-like and sodium alginate, which is also the main component of the paste. Thank you for pushing the shoddy construction of the cafeteria in the city, so that the genetic sequences of these 2 organisms are very complete. According to Blue Star's biological gene heat resistance, usually at around 9095 degrees Celsius, double-stranded cleavage into single-strand occurs, and single-strand genes require a high temperature above 200 degrees Celsius to further cleavage. And the biological genes of One Piece world obviously have higher heat resistance. After all, the first pass for prisoners to enter Propulsion City is to baptize by immersing them in 100 degrees Celsius boiling water. In addition to the shoddy construction of the canteen in the city, the process of these squishy processing is probably just boiling water and boiling it. Anyway, it is the prisoner who is eating. After eating these pastes, the gene chains of the 2 organisms have been recorded by Wang Gao, waiting for the surroundings to calm down. He started to prepare for the experiment. Chain reverse transcription. After the ability was activated, a small piece of old skin on his arm was transformed into that kind of algae cell, just like a piece of kelp growing out of his body. After a while, the water in the cells of this small piece of yellow-brown kelp quickly evaporates. Obviously, this is caused by the high temperature and dry environment of the hunger hell. There was no accident, everything was in Wang Gao's expectation. Activate the ability again. Chain reverse transcription. Next to that small piece of kelp, another piece of old skin was transformed into a rice seedling, and the rice seedling could not withstand the harsh environment of hunger hell. However, Wang Gao knew that there were drought-tolerant genes in the genetic sequence of rice, and he quickly activated each gene in the rice seedlings. The rice seedling kept changing on his arm. This is not. Found it. With the activation of drought-tolerant genes, the rice seedlings regained a little bit of vitality, but they would die sooner or later without water supplementation. But Wang Gao was not disappointed. Activate aerial root genes, activate lignification genes, introduce algae-type chloroplast genes and algae genes, introduce sodium alginate production genes. Through complex genetic modification, it took 2 days to complete the genetic modification of the new species. The creature named dry zao vine began to be placed in the cell by Wang Gao and quietly spread out to the corridor outside. Dry algae vines are extremely resistant to drought and high temperature, have environmental camouflage colors, can absorb the fine water molecules in the air, and can grow rapidly under both weak and strong light. The surface layer is hard and transparent wood. Use super strong roots to take root in the gap between the cell and the corridor floor, disguise it as a caulking cement, and use the corridor light to carry out photosynthesis. But the dry algae vines can also grow leaves, but they did not use this ability on the corridor floor. Wang Gao only let the dry algae grow leaves in his own cell and some vacant cells. The leaves of dry algae vines also have a transparent wooden surface, which protects the inner layer of discolored chloroplasts, covering the ground, just like a slate. As for why he made the dry algae vine, the reason is for food and water. With the supplement of food and water, Wang Gao's physical strength can be restored to the maximum extent, instead of the current state of hunger. Through the connection of dry algae and vines, a steady stream of nutrients and water converge to his body. The malnourished body over the years has gradually recovered its strength as if it had been in the rain for a long time. Of course, he also thought of the way to escape the cell, and it is currently being implemented. In the rock wall behind, the vines are disintegrating the rock wall little by little. The roots of the plants seem to be insignificant in the destructive power of the rock, but over time, it is enough to change the terrain. What's more, this is a genetically modified organism. Wang Gao added some of his own genes to the genes of Philistichezidilus, such as those that produce stomach acid. Behind the rock wall on the inside of the cell, he carefully observed it with a domineering look. It was a rock formation with a thickness of 1,830 meters. This piece of rock directly penetrated through several layers of the city, and finally it should lead to the 6th layer of infinite hell. But digging holes means digging holes, but you have to be careful. Not only the guards on the surface of the city are pushed forward, but there may also be people from the Buddy Army. There is nothing wrong, it is a member of the Buddy Army. You need to know that in Pushing City, the 5.5 layer hidden between the 5th and 6th floors was excavated by the giant Jasmine. Was unearthed more than 100 years ago, which means that the 5.5th floor has existed for at least nearly 100 years, and the giant Jasmine is one of the commanders of the GE Brothers Army. Of course, at this time, the Buddy Army, I don't know if it is established or not. Wang Gao doesn't know if the dragon has recruited the giant. If it is recruited, the secret of the 5.5th floor must already be known to the senior level of the Buddy Army. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. However, according to the information he has, the Ladyboy King Yvonne deliberately entered Propulsion City around 1510 in Haiwan-Li. If this information is true, the dragon should have recruited the giant Jasmine around 1509, and then learned that in the city, there is 5.5 floors and an undersea tunnel that can be freely entered and exited. At this time, it was 1498, and the probability of Jasmine encountering the dragon was not high. After all, Wang Lufei was still in a liquid state, and it was estimated that the dragon was still in the navy. Even so, Wang Gao didn't take it lightly, even if he knew the hidden secret path and the 5.5th floor. If he was too overwhelmed, if he encountered the dragon or other people in the Buddy army, he might be wiped out. He is a brain eater, not a muscular rasher. In his boring prison life, Wang Gao appeared calm, but he was actually doing genetic experiments in secret while digging tunnels. The dry algae vine continued to spread in the cracks in the corridor, during which several surveillance phone bugs were also found. Took the gene from the phone worm at random. Wang Gao was very interested in this special creature, and after studying the gene of the phone worm, has further enriched the genes of the gene bank, and at the same time he acquired the ability of the phone worm, including the ability to steal the content of the phone worm's communication, send and pick up the communication wave, make the phone worm, or monitor the organs. After possessing the ability of the phone worm, Wang Gao's ability was further strengthened. Before he wanted to control the dry algae vine, he had to be connected to the body, but now he can detach it for remote control. Of course, if you choose remote control, you will not be able to transmit nutrients and water. At the same time, you must ensure that the genetic organisms produced are basically intelligent, otherwise you can only give rigid fixed instructions. It has been 7 eating times since Wang Gao came to this world, that is, about 35 days have passed. On the outside of the sea, Roger, the Pirate King, should have ended a month ago. The time when Roger was executed was probably between May and June of 1498 in the Haiwan calendar. This was calculated by Wang Gao based on Ace's date of birth. Portquez D. Luoyu gave birth to Ace after 20 months of pregnancy. In other words, when Roger was in the South China Sea in April 1498, he must have been in the South China Sea. He left the South China Sea and surrendered to the Navy until it was confirmed that Liu Ju was really pregnant. According to Wang Gao's monitoring of the internal communications of Push City, he obtained information that the date of Roger's execution was June 13, and the time of Golden Lion's imprisonment was June 8. After 35 days, it is July 13. At this time, the dry algae vines controlled by Wang Gao have spread from the 3rd layer of hunger to the 2nd layer of fierce beast hell. Compared to the hunger hell, the beast has a more friendly environment, and the vines can produce more nutrients and water. And in the beast hell, there are many interesting creatures, such as the sea fighter blue orangutan, little hippo, big praying mantis, combined scorpion, sphinx, snake, and rooster. Of course, in the scorching on the 4th floor, there are 5 jailer beasts with devil fruit ability awakening, and the research value is also not small. It's just that Wang Gao was very afraid of the 4th floor because it was the location of the director's office. The current director Columbus, the deputy director Magellan, the guardian Yuji Ziliu and others often acted on the 4th floor. For Columbus, whose abilities are unknown, Wang Gao didn't want to test him easily. And the jailer beast is not fixed on the 4th floor. According to the observations, cows and rhinos often go to the fierce beast on duty. The prisoners on the other 2nd tier are often attacked by jailer beasts or other monsters, which brings great convenience to the collection of genetic samples. At the same time, he also manipulated the dry algae vines, spreading to the red lotus along the large hollow between the fierce beast and the red lotus hell. Successfully obtained the genes of 2 special plants, sword tree and needle grass. Collected the genes of sword tree and needle grass, which enriched Wang Gao's gene pool. After introducing part of the genes of these 2 plants into the dry algae vine, there were only a few initial versions of the dry algae vine before, and once again obtained comprehensive strengthening. Derived several new forms, dry algae vine needles, dry algae thorns, dry algae sharp blade, dry algae shield machine, dry algae meat grinder and the like. For example, the vine needles can not only stab like a spear, but also eject the needle. As for the dry algae shield machine, Wang Gao just tried it, but did not put it into use, because the hunger was too quiet, and the sound of the shield machine destroying the rock was too loud, and it was ironically exposed once it was used. After more than a month of corrosive excavation, a hole with a diameter of 2 meters and a depth of 3.4 meters has been excavated on the rock wall behind him. As for the excavated earth and stone, part of it is used as a nutrient component of the vine, and part of it is camouflaged as the rock wall inside the cell. After all, the dimensions of these cells are usually 510 meters wide, 510 meters long, 310 meters high, and some are extra large. Wang Gao's height is 2.73 meters. In this world, he is only a medium height, and his cell is medium-sized. The tunnel that was excavated was only 2 meters in diameter. In fact, it was not a big problem, because he can now actively adjust his body shape through the chain of fruits, and it can be bigger or smaller. In order to avoid accidents, Wang Gao's real body has entered the tunnel at this time, and the leaves of the vines on the rock wall are used to form a lignifide camouflage layer. At this time, wearing shackles, the Wang Gao in the cell is just a clone made by him. This is also thanks to the genes of the phone worm, which allows him to remotely and wirelessly control the genetic creatures he created. There is a clone in the cell. Even if he encounters Yu Zhiliu again, he doesn't have to worry about being killed. In the dark tunnel, there is no trace of light, but it does not affect Wang Gao. His eyesight and hearing coupled with his superb sight and color are enough to ensure freedom of movement in the dark environment. Feeling the improved dry algae vine, constantly launching the ability of acid erosion and digging, now the dry algae vine can dig forward 50 to 70 centimeters a day, which is 6 times faster than before. But this speed still did not satisfy him. Compared with the giant jasmines pushing the fruit, the acid erosion of the dry algae vines was too slow. He didn't want to waste time digging holes, he had to find a way to speed up. Touched his chin, and his quantum computing started again, analyzing all the methods currently available. A few minutes later, Wang Gao has already thought of some methods. Or someone may ask, can't it change the size of the body? Just become smaller, can't it just hide and go out? In fact, his ability to grow bigger and smaller needs to follow a principle, that is, deformation and quality remain unchanged. To put it simply, Wang Gao's total body cells cannot be changed, and the shape of the body can be changed to achieve the goal of getting smaller. Just like now, his normal body size is 2.73 meters and 473 kilograms. If he wants to become 1 meter tall, it can only be split into 3 to 4 children, and the total weight of 473 kilograms cannot be changed. Especially the brain cells, even the brain structure cannot be easily changed. At least he is not 100% sure that he can completely recover after changing the brain structure. Is not that it cannot be changed at all, but that the lifespan of the cell must be taken into consideration. After all, the number of cell divisions in organisms is limited. If in the process of shrinking the body, the excess cells are not preserved, but directly discarded. When it is necessary to increase the body size, either the exogenous genetic organisms will be chosen as the filling of the body, or it can only accelerate the division of its own cells. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com. And to accelerate the division of own cells, the consequence is that the lifespan will be shortened. Wang Gao naturally does not choose to abandon his own cells in order to shrink his body. After all, the human body is an organic whole. It is best not to wave around casually until there is no way to achieve immortality. This is also the reason why only old skin and hair were used as nutrients when cultivating and transforming the vines, instead of other cells. Therefore, he can shrink in size, but he cannot become the size of an ant. The existence of the brain determines the lower limit of the reduction. But he still modified the excavation plan. The tunnel with a diameter of 2 meters is still too big, and he can completely turn into a snake shape. A tunnel with a diameter of about 50 centimeters can allow him to snake through. The destination of the tunnel is the tunnel dug by Jasmine the giant. According to Wang Gao's careful exploration these days, the nearest giant tunnel, in the rock formation on the left, is about 322 meters away. After the diameter of the excavation tunnel is reduced, the excavation speed can be increased to about 1.5 meters per day. This speed is still not good. But Wang Gao had other alternative plans. He closed his eyes and quickly spread the vines toward the inner rock wall of the cell in an empty cell in the hunger hell. The inner rock wall of this vacant cell is only 8.32 meters away from the giant's tunnel. After digging it through, let the dry vines enter the giant's tunnel. As long as the Philanthus sylvestris enter the giant's tunnel, it can dig into his location on the side of the giant's tunnel. Under the premise of starting construction at both ends, the construction period can be shortened by half. In addition, let the dry grass vines enter the giant's tunnel, and you can also detect the situation in the giant's tunnel in advance, and be prepared to deal with it. Another eating day passed. The unchanging heat and dryness of the hunger hell, and the land of bones and sand, is still as silent as ever. In a vacant cell about 200 meters away from Wang Gao's cell, a thumb-sized hole was filled with special tawny vines. Excavating this small tunnel of more than 8 meters did not use straight excavation, but accelerated the excavation speed according to the weak parts in the rock formation. The straight line distance is only more than 8 meters, but the total length of the small tunnel is about 14.7 meters. At this time, the dry algae vine has broken through into the giant tunnel. The inside of this tunnel is really wide, with a radius of about 8 to 10 meters. Obviously, the tunnel that the giant jasmine dug naturally has to ensure that he can easily pass through it. Under such a premise, the tunnel radius must not be small. After entering the giant's tunnel, the dry algae vine quickly resulted, and a dozen reconnaissance insects flew out of the fruit sac. Reconnaissance bee, similar to a wasp, it has night vision compound eyes, hypersensitivity pressure element hearing, pheromone smell, environmental camouflage, radio wave radar. The king took a part of his attention and directly manipulated the scout bee, slowly detecting the past on both sides of the giant tunnel. At the same time, the dry algae vine also chose the position, aimed at the location of Wang Gao's cell, and began to use acid etching to excavate. Excavating on both sides at the same time, it is estimated that the construction period can be shortened by half. Wang Gao also quickly digged a small tunnel the size of a thumb to assist in the excavation according to the fragile part of the rock formation. It is estimated that with the latest revised data, it is estimated that in 11 days, the big tunnel can be dug, and then his body can enter the giant tunnel. Looked back to the scout bee. As the scout bee kept advancing, the internal structure diagram of the giant's tunnel in his mind was improving and expanding little by little. As for why he didn't directly use the domineering detection of sight and hearing, he also wanted to use sight and hearing, but Columbus, Magellan, and others were on the 4th floor. From the 3rd floor to the bottom, there are not a few people who can see the color, and it is easy to attract attention by using the color to scan. Wang Gao is a cautious person. There is no need for such brainless things. Soon one of the reconnaissance bees felt the strong light ahead. He carefully manipulated the reconnaissance bee and approached the position of the light source. After approached, I discovered that this place was located in the Bone Sand Land in the Hunger Hell, and the specific location was a bone mountain. Skeleton Mountain is where the prisoner's bones are discarded every time Hunger Hell cleans the cell. The Bone Mountain is more than 10 meters deep, and there are piles of bones everywhere. The giant tunnel is at the exit of the Hunger Hell, and it is hidden in one of the Bone Mountain. The scout bee flew more than 10 meters from the small gap before coming to the Bone Mountain and making a circle here. After recording the relevant information, he continued to control the reconnaissance bee, returned to the giant tunnel, and continued to fly forward. Soon after passing through a continuous ramp similar to the winding road, I heard screams and various beast roars. Obviously, this section of the giant tunnel has entered the second layer of beast hell. After a period of flying, I finally found a faint light again. The exit was blocked by a huge stone, leaving only a finger-wide gap. The scout bee flew out cautiously and found that this was actually the living area of Warcraft above the Warcraft lair. A dozen meters below, a lot of small hippos are sleeping in the pool. After clarifying the specific location, he again manipulated the scout bee back to the giant's tunnel, followed by a continuous winding ramp. Obviously above this is the Red Lotus on the basement level. The exit is hidden in the needle grass and the sword forest, and the entrance of the hole is full of needle grass. And in the rock wall of a gorge joint, the width of the gorge joint is about 3 to 4 meters. The bottom and both sides of the rock walls are covered with needle grass. To enter the giant tunnel, you must pass through needle grass. It feels estimated and rolling. The nail board is almost the same. No wonder few prisoners enter here. Wang Gao discovered that the upward path was not interrupted. Obviously, the giant Jasmine wanted to try to leave from the ground floor of the advanced city. Entered the giant tunnel on the ground floor and became narrower. It is estimated that the giant Jasmine could only crawl in and out at that time. He found a lot of traces of being refilled. This situation can only show that after many attempts by the giant at that time, he found that from the ground floor, he could not find a way to escape the city. The only remaining passage, the exit, is on the outer rock wall, about 20 meters from the sea surface, but at this time the exit has been blocked by a boulder, leaving only a gap. Also the scout bee can pass, and among other animals, even the small mouse is coming. It is estimated that it will be difficult to squeeze through. Compared to upward reconnaissance to the 4th underground scorching hell, the 5th underground extremely cold hell, the 5.5 underground, and the 6th underground infinite hell, Wang Gao is more cautious and slower. This is not only because he is afraid of the monsters, but also because the giant tunnels that go down have become more complicated, like a huge underground maze. He was also quite speechless about this. Such a large-scale tunnel has been hidden for nearly 100 years without being discovered by pushing the city. The guards advancing the city have a big heart. Maybe this is arrogance. I thought that I was on the bottom of the windless zone. As long as I guarded the exit on the ground, I thought that everything would be worry-free. If you double-check with the domineering look and hearing, you will find some clues in the city. Perhaps the unbreakable for 800 years made them think that the advancement of the city was a copper wall and an iron wall, but unfortunately they seem to have forgotten the fact that in this world, there is a weird power like devil fruit. There seems to be no other way out of the seabed prison in the windless zone. In fact, the seabed is a way out. The giant Jasmine dug a tunnel from the seabed and escaped from Propulsion City. After the 8 reconnaissance bees entered the 4th floor of Scorching Hell, they encountered a lot of fork roads, and there were many traces of refilling. After exploring for 5 full hours, the scout bee discovered all the giant tunnels in the Scorching Hell, as well as the hidden entrances and exits. Then the scouting bee began to enter the 5th floor, the extremely cold hell, which is another extremely complex tunnel. 3 days later, the scout bee has fully discovered the entire giant tunnel, as well as the 5.5th floor, as well as the tunnel hidden under the sea. However, the undersea tunnel is very long. From the perspective of the direction, it was not excavated in the direction of the Great Root Paradise, but in the direction of the South China Sea. As for how long the giant Jasmine dug, anyway, the reconnaissance bee has been flying in it for 17 hours, and the reconnaissance bee has a cruising speed of 30 km per hour. In other words, the current distance of this undersea tunnel is about 510 km, and it has not yet reached the end. Actually, this is not an exaggeration. Because the width of the windless zone is very large, equivalent to 1/2 of the width of the park, the area of the windless zone on both sides of the park is about the same as that of the park. If the windless zone is not wide enough, the windless zone will not become a nest of Neptune species. Those who start at a few hundred meters away, and there are super large Neptune species that are several kilometers and tens of thousands of meters broad. According to the data in Wang Gao's memory, the windless zone between the New World and the West Sea is about 1,300 kilometers wide. Regarding the submarine tunnel excavated by the giant Jasmine, Wang Gao sent scout bees to continue the reconnaissance, while on the other side he fully digs the cell wall. He has planned to use the 5.5th floor as a temporary base. Haiwan calendar July 28, 1498. Hiss. After the sound of acid corroding the rock, the dry algae vines on both sides successfully merged. A tunnel with a length of more than 300 meters penetrated Wang Gao's cell, and the giant tunnel retracted the vine body of the dry algae vine. Wang Gao's body squirmed for a while, then turned into a big python, and got into the tunnel. After a while, he entered the giant's tunnel. The python-shaped body squirmed again, and Wang Gao returned to his normal shape, surrounded by a huge dark tunnel. The data detected by the scouting bee has already constructed a three-dimensional map of the advanced city, the giant tunnel, and 5.5 layers in his mind. In the giant tunnel that no one noticed, Wang Gao no longer suppressed the ability of dry algae vines. When he entered the ground floor before, although he did not find any useful species, he still manipulated the dry algae vines into a seaweed form. Now those special seaweeds have been attached to the outer wall of Propulsion City, bringing countless nutrients and water to Wang Gao. Seeing his mind move, the dry algae quickly wrapped around Wang Gao's body, forming a pair of armor attached to him. For those with the devil fruit ability, sea water and sea building stones are a threat, but this threat is limited to direct contact with themselves. And the creation made by using the power of the devil fruit will not be affected by the sea floor stone factor. At this time, Wang Gao, wearing vine armor, would not lose his strength even if he jumped into the sea. After finished the vine armor, he raised his hand and pointed. Countless dry algae vines emerged from the vine armor, and then spread downward along the giant tunnel. Rattan mimicry skates. A pair of roller skates grew under his feet, and they were similar to the wheels of a train. At this time, the fast-spreading dryweed vines in the giant's tunnel also formed a track in the giant's tunnel. A series of vines emerged from the vine armor. These vines grabbed the dry algae vines on the rock wall, and then alternately pulled Wang Gao to glide forward. Track plus roller skates, pulling with vines to accelerate, so that his speed soared to about 120 km per hour. Although there is no way for the vines to overgrown all the giant tunnels and 5.5 floors at once, a track leading directly to 5.5 has been built before. Within 10 minutes, Wang Gao came to his goal. Advancing to the 5.5th floor of the city, a hidden space between the extreme cold and the infinite hell, this space is very vast. Of course, now it is not as vast as it was later, a hall with an area of 15,000 square meters and a height of 20 meters, and then a dozen rooms. In many rooms, there are still some bones piled up. Wang Gao has seen it with a scout bee before, mainly the bones of some army wolves and unknown fishes. It is estimated that this is the place where the giant jasmine stores food. The source of unknown fish should be caught from the underground river. When the reconnaissance bee was scouting the undersea tunnels, they discovered that there were many branch tunnels that were connected to underground rivers and underground lakes. This also explains the source of food supply for the giant jasmine. When the tunnel was excavated, blind fish and fresh water in these underground rivers were used as supplies along the way. Otherwise, digging an undersea tunnel for thousands of kilometers, even if the giant jasmine is a giant and devil fruit capable person, it can't bear the long-term non-eating or drinking. Wang Gao stood in the hall, spreading his hands. On the vine armor, countless spores sprayed out, cooperating with the dryweed vines in the hall to quickly transform the place. The vines and leaves of dry algae vines form closely fitted floors, wall tiles, and ceilings. The fluorescent gene extracted from the fluorescent creature in the underground river quickly formed a biological bulb, and the hall was enveloped by soft white light. A huge wicker chair grew out of the hall. The wicker chair was connected to the sturdy rattan tubes, which were connected to the dry algae vines advancing the city. After Wang Gao sat on the wicker chair, a dozen vines stretched out from the wicker chair. These vines were instantly connected to him. Through the wicker chair, nutrients, water, genetic samples, and the entire city could be induced. After being temporarily safe, he did not leave pushing city so quickly. After all, this is a treasure. If you ask where there are the most devil fruit abilities among the blue sea stars, and the easiest to get them, then only advance the city. Why give up such a treasured place with rich research resources? Now that he decided to use this as a base, some problems must be solved. He only saw his thoughts move. The entrances and exits connected to the giant's tunnel were hidden in the various layers of Propulsion City. The hole excavated in the previous cell was also quickly buried, leaving only a small tunnel with a diameter of 50 centimeters. This kind of reland filling, he is the one who left behind. The landfills are all wrapped up and divided by dry algae vines to form blocks of camouflage rocks. If necessary, the camouflage rocks can be quickly separated. Therefore, Wang Gao did not stop the work of digging the tunnel. The excavated tunnel can be filled with camouflage rock wrapped in a reedy, and when necessary, the camouflage rock can be quickly removed to form a channel. After closing all the entrances and exits of the advanced city, the next problem to be dealt with is the undersea tunnel that does not know where it leads. Since he decided to use this as a temporary base, he didn't want to be touched by someone suddenly. After all, this was dug in by the giant Jasmine. Once the opponent joins the buddy army, the dragon will definitely send someone to detect the secret here, and even enter it himself. Time passed again about 10 hours. Scout B gave him a message and found bright light. Will came. Through the 5 sense organs of the scouting bee, Wang Gao seemed to be here in person. The entrance of the cave was also blocked by huge rocks. There was only a small gap left in UU reading www.yunsha.com. After coming out of the gap in the cave entrance, the scenery greeted by the eyes is a deserted dense forest. The trees are very tall and towering trees hundreds of meters high abound. The reconnaissance bee flew high in the sky, and found that the entrance of the cave was halfway up the mountain, and the island was not too big, and its visual area was about 13 square kilometers. There are 2 mountains on the island. The climate should be a tropical rainforest. No trace of intelligent creatures has been found for the time being. Other reconnaissance bees flew out from the entrance of the cave one after another, scouting the entire island carefully. A scout bee flew to another mountain, and suddenly a slimy tentacles shot at the scout bee. The scout bee with super 5 senses, it is like a farting bug, spewing out a stinking gas. With the help of reaction force, instantly out of danger, he immediately raised his flight altitude. The owner of the tentacle is a toad in disguise, and the tentacle is actually its tongue. The dangers of the tropical rainforest, coupled with the special nature of the Shanghai blue star itself, make the creatures here even more dangerous. If ordinary people come to this tropical rainforest, it is estimated that the end of a life of 9 deaths. Because the 2 mountains on this island resemble a camel lying on the sea, Wang Gao named it Camel Island. After a day of careful reconnaissance on Camel Island, I didn't find the giant Jasmine, but on Haofeng Mountain, I found a cave dug out a long time ago. Looking at the length, width, and height of the cave, the height of nearly 20 meters is probably the temporary residence of the giant Jasmine. The giant should have been here for a long time, but Wang Gao didn't have any luck. It was troublesome if the other party left. If he is still here, he can still find a way to seal this secret. Now some preparations must be made in advance. Haiwan Calendar August 5, 1498. South China Sea, Camel Island. Wang Gao has been on this small island for several days. The island is about 810 kilometers away from Propulsion City. After he came here quickly by using the sliding track, he set up a second temporary base on Camel Island. The city is rich in devil fruit materials, but lacks other animal and plant materials. The existence of Camel Island just fills this vacancy. The cave left by the giant Jasmine has undergone tremendous changes at this time. The entrance of the cave has been made smaller by the camouflage rock, and then a gate made of ironwood has been installed. Inside the cave, the fluorescent fruit acts as a light bulb, and the vine serves as a wire for conveying nutrients to provide energy to the fluorescent fruit. The water circulating air conditioning system hidden in the ceiling vents regulates the airflow, air composition, temperature, and humidity inside the cave. To make this water-cooled air conditioner, the principle is very simple. You can drill directly with vines to open up the underground water layer. Although humans in this world have much higher tolerance limits for the environment, this does not mean that Wang Gao likes extreme climates. Camel Island is a tropical rainforest with high temperature and rain all year round. The temperature is above 30 degrees Celsius all year round. After being roasted in the hunger for so long, he doesn't want to endure the harsh temperature anymore. Inside the cave, he has continued to expand it a lot. Since it is not advancing the inside of the city, there is no need to consider sound and vibration during the renovation process. First, use dryweed vine mantis knife and other means to violently destroy part of the rock mass, then remove the rock, and then reinforce and refine the internal rock wall. In less than 3 days, he built the Camel Island base, which is divided into 3 floors. The first floor is above the giant cave, where Wang Gao prepared a residence for himself. The second floor is based on the giant's cave and contains the main experimental items and material warehouses. The third floor is under the giant's cave and contains living creatures. Laboratory and underground test field. In the laboratory on the 3rd floor, the genetic samples collected in the past few days are stored in a special constant temperature cabinet, which is a special test tube neatly arranged. The test tube is filled with a light green liquid, which is a nutrient solution specially used to maintain cell viability, and a number is also posted on the surface of the test tube. The world's biological resources are very rich. There are many special species in the tropical rainforest of Camel Island. Some species specially marked by Wang Gao are very valuable for research. I picked up the gene sample numbered. This gene sample comes from a plant crabatone, which is a carnivorous plant that grows in the mangroves by the sea and feeds on stone crabs that live near the mangroves. The stone crab is a kind of crab with a hard shell. The adult stone crab is about 30 to 45 centimeters in size and weighs 15 to 20 kilograms. The meat inside is delicious, similar to an emperor crab. Yesterday, he ate more than a dozen of them. Except that the crab shells are hard to open, the taste is really good. He, a man with armed color and domineering and strong physical strength, said that the shells of stone crabs are hard, and the shells of this kind of crabs are really hard. According to the results of molecular and atomic scanning, the shell of the stone crab is based on chitin, with iron, manganese, and silicon added to form a composite shell, which is about 1.6 times stronger than ordinary manganese steel, and extremely resistant to corrosion. In order to form a stable ecosystem in nature, invincible natural creatures will certainly not appear. The mangrove forests on the west coast of Camel Island are not the area where stone crabs live. They live in reef caves on the seabed. The mangrove forest is their foraging area, but their food is a kind of pest on the mangrove, and the stone crab that eats the pest looks like a good thing. Actually, according to Wang Gao's observation, if the population of stone crabs gets out of control, they will even deliberately destroy the bark of mangroves, allowing them to secrete resin and attract more pests. Therefore, the existence of crab-eating flowers is to limit the population of stone crabs, avoid its flooding and damage the ecological balance. The crab-eating flower itself cannot adapt to the saltwater environment. It must coexist with mangroves. It provides protection and part of the nutrients for the mangroves. The mangrove provides fresh water for the crab-eating flower and attracts stone crabs with pests. These creatures form the mangrove ecosystem on the west coast of Luojuo Island. If any species suddenly goes wrong, it will inevitably lead to a chain reaction in this ecosystem. Wang Gao is more concerned about the digestive juice of crab-eating flowers, which is a kind of digestive juice containing paralyzing ingredients and super corrosive. The corrosiveness of this digestive juice comes from the organic acid component in it. The corrosiveness is about 3.72 times that of aqua regia, and it is fatal to rocks and metal products. The molecular structure of the paralytic component in the digestive juice is somewhat similar to dulang ding, but the anesthetic effect is very strong. After testing, even a body like Wang Gao still cannot hold the intravenous injection of 0.27 mg. If it is inhaled from the respiratory tract, it only needs to inhale 2.1 to 2.6 mg, and it will enter a state of general paralysis. Regarding the crab shell ingredients of stone crabs and the digestive juice of crab-eating flowers, Wang Gao quickly incorporated these useful things into his gene pool. The super-corrosive organic acid can enhance the silent excavation speed of the dry algae vine. After trial, the dry algae vine can increase the speed of digging tunnels to 56 meters per day in the silent state. If it is violent digging, the speed can be increased to about 80,100 meters per day. The composition of the crab shell can increase the defensive strength and attack strength of the creation. The same super anesthetic can also exert a huge effect in experiments or battles. You need to know that in order to restrain the stone crab, crab eater has evolved a highly permeable anesthetic component. Even if it is in contact with the skin, the limbs will become stiff and numb after a long period of time. However, on the experimental platform at this time, it was not a dry algae or the like, but a seagull. The anesthetized seagull didn't know what Wang Gao did on it, but with the help of atomic-level sights, the power of the chain entered the depths of the seagull's cells. However, Wang Gao didn't change the gene chain of the seagull on a large scale. He just gave it a few special genes, namely parasitic fusion, brainwave reception, and fast food absorption. These 3 ability genes were inserted, tested for a few days, and finally got a relatively perfect result. In the cage on the side, there were about 100 seagulls. The reason why only these 3 genes are given to seagulls is not that other genes cannot be given, but that it is unnecessary. I saw his finger flick, and the dark green beads flew to all the seagulls, and then the dark green beads were like water droplets hitting the stone, like a parasitic. The seagulls kept flapping their wings and screaming. But the dark green liquid quickly penetrated into their bodies. This thing is called biological reproductive nucleus, which can form genetic reproductive armor on organisms. The biological reproductive nucleus implanted in seagulls is the first-generation product that Wang Gao experimented with from scout bees, biological colony scout. The function is to strengthen the 5 sense organs, super survivability, super camouflage, radio wave communication, controllable gene collapse program. Seagulls equipped with scouts can take advantage of the wide distribution of seagulls to obtain information for Wang Gao. Is only scouting for seagulls, there are currently 2 shortcomings. 2 shortcomings of reconnaissance seagulls. The first disadvantage is that seagulls themselves need to be genetically modified before they can adapt to biological breeding. Natural seagulls that have not been genetically modified cannot be directly implanted into biological reproductive equipment. If they are implanted forcibly, the seagulls will be out of control, and even directly cause the genetic collapse of the seagulls and die. This problem is mainly due to the characteristics of biological colonies. This is a genetically modulated creation. In order to avoid loss of control and mutation, the evolutionary ability of biological colonies has been locked. Unless Wang Gao himself releases the genetic lock of the biological cloak, the biological cloak can only be used according to the set ability. At the same time, Wang Gao's genetic modification ability comes from the chain fruit, and after the genetic creation is separated from his body, he naturally has no chain fruit ability, so he cannot complete the genetic modification independently. Now he has begun to study the 2nd generation of biological cloning, hoping to give the biological clonal nucleus, self-replication, modify the host gene, so that the host and biological cloak can be perfectly integrated. But this work is not easy, it may take a while. The second question is about control. Although some control procedures are set in the biological reproductive nucleus, the instinct of the seagull itself still affects the precise control of the biological reproductive nucleus. If you want to solve this problem, you can only rely on the controller behind it for manual intervention. In addition, information analysis and storage are also a problem. There are only more than 100 reconnaissance seagulls. This problem is not obvious yet, but as the number increases in the future, it will have to be considered. Looking at the seagulls in the cage, after the fusion was completed, Wang Gao thought quietly. First, detect the genetic modification of the seagulls. You can create a genetic adjustment cabin and set up a fixed genetic adjustment program. In this way, Wang Gao does not need to do it himself. The genetic adjustment cabin can continuously transform seagulls, and mass production of seagulls can be reconnaissance. If manual control, information analysis, and information storage are used, a specialized clone is created. I saw Wang Gao isolate one of his own stem cells, and then opened the stem cell restrictions and turned it into a cancer cell. Is connected to the body's nutrient delivery tube, injecting a large amount of nutrients into the cancer cells, and soon the infinite proliferation mechanism of the cancer cells makes them proliferate wildly. The meatball became a meatball with a radius of about 2.1 meters in less than 27 hours, but the meatball at this time, although it is homologous to Wang Gao, is a meatball formed by the proliferation of cancer cells. There is only endless greed and appetite, without wisdom and reason. Chain gene chain lock. The cancer cells in the meatball are repaired by the chain fruit ability to repair the loopholes of infinite proliferation. At this time, the cancer cells are the same as normal cells. After 72 divisions, they will enter a state of senescence. Ordinary humans on this planet have a cell division limit of about 72 times. The restricted cancer cells are just like a newborn baby, full of vitality. Chain gene induction. The fruit ability is activated again, and the cells in the meatball accelerate the differentiation, using Wang Gao himself as a template to quickly differentiate into various organ cells, stem cells, bone skin, and the like. 2 days later, the meatball squirmed for a while. It seemed that the meatball's meat membrane reached its limit. One hand tore the meat membrane, and then a little giant walked out of the meatball. It's just that the little giant's eyes are very hollow. It seems that there is something wrong with his intelligence. There was no surprise to Wang Gao, because this man-made man's intelligence at this time was only equivalent to that of a newborn baby. He input the memory template he compiled directly into the artificial human's brain through brain waves. After receiving the memory, the artificial human's eyes gradually become more energetic. After adapting to his memory and physical abilities, the robot knelt down on one knee and said respectfully, "Father, Lucifer pays you the highest respect." Wang Gao waved his hand, destroying the broken meatball and the culture solution all over the floor, while instructing, "Get up. The task is in memory." Understood. This is my honor. Lucifer stood up after speaking. 3.14 meters tall, he has strong muscles with a golden ratio on his body. The style of painting is comparable to that of a muscular man in Hong Kong. And on the big bald head, except for the vertical eye print in the middle of the forehead, there is no other hair, which seems to remind others that this person is extremely smart. Actually, the brain of the humanoid Lucifer is indeed very powerful, because Wang Gao needs him to control the reconnaissance seagulls. If the brain is not powerful enough, it will not be able to deal with the flood of information that is fed back all the time. Wang Gao took Lucifer and took the elevator to the top of the mountain above the base. This is the highest peak of Camel Island, with an altitude of about 736 meters. Apart from the bare rocks on the top of the mountain, there are only some weeds growing in the cracks between the rocks. The sea breeze was blowing Wang Gao's long black hair, so he simply tied a ponytail, stood on a large rock, and glanced at the top of the mountain. The top of the mountain is not wide, only about 120 square meters, and the top is in a state of rugged rocks. It was not difficult for him. Wang Gao opened his hands and countless vines spread out, and then the vines occupied the top of the mountain. On the steep side of the mountain on the north side, small caves were corroded out, and then the soil and rocks squirmed and changed, and a cavity of about 500 square meters appeared below the top of the mountain. After arranging highly poisonous thorn vines around the top of the mountain, some enhanced antenna vines were created, which were arranged in all directions on the top of the mountain to enhance the reception and emission of radio waves. Came to the cave, he casually made a control wicker chair. Lucifer immediately sat on it, connecting the vines to his body. Then on the other side of the cave, reading www. Yuyuganshu.com has arranged a special seagull gene modulation cabin and a scout biological reproduction nucleus replication cabin. The next step is to create a special customized version of the biological colony for Lucifer. First, it is necessary to create a bird that catches seagulls. This is very simple. Based on the eagle gene, add the anesthetic gene of crab-eating flowers and the cobweb gene of bird-catching spiders. A genetic creature named Falcon was created. And Lucifer's biological reproductive equipment has the genetic seeds of falcons. When needed, some seeds can be copied to quickly give birth to a batch of falcons. Even the genetic seeds of seagulls are in Lucifer's biological colony. Then it is to enhance Lucifer's information storage ability, information analysis, and processing ability. Wang Gao's solution is an artificial brain. The artificial brain is wrapped in a meatball, filled with nutrient solution, which is equivalent to a biological version of the CPU core. Because it is an artificial brain, Lucifer can write some data processing programs in the blank consciousness of these brains. Lucifer's biological reproductive nucleus was initially prepared. With the implantation of the biological reproductive nucleus, Lucifer quickly mastered the relevant abilities. A vine grew out of his body, and then the top of the vine began to expand, and finally turned into a pale green sphere, about the size of a basketball, with an artificial brain immersed in it. Sure enough, with the help of an artificial brain, Lucifer's speed of processing information has become even faster. Immediately, Wang Gao handed over the surveillance vines and nets of Camel Island and the more than 100 reconnaissance seagulls to Lucifer's control. Lucifer, your next task is to spread the reconnaissance seagulls across the entire planet. Yes, Father God.